What started as a normal subway ride for Barron Trump quickly spiraled into a moment no one in that car, or the world, would forget. You won't believe how one simple act of defiance against cruelty turned the silence of strangers into a lesson for everyone watching. The subway car rattled through the underground tunnels of New York City, its hum a dull background noise to the quiet tension among the passengers. Barron Trump sat in the far corner, trying to blend in. A baseball cap was pulled low over his face, and a gray hoodie hid his tall frame. For once, there were no cameras, no media, and no flashing lights. Just the rhythmic rocking of the train and the illusion of anonymity. The peace didn't last. At the next station, the doors hissed open. A frail elderly woman stepped inside, holding an overstuffed bag tightly against her chest. Her silver hair peeked out from beneath a bright red cap that made her stand out. "Make America Great Again" gleamed in bold white letters. Barron noticed her immediately, and so did everyone else. A man near the center of the car smirked, nudging his friend. His voice cut through the silence. "Seriously, Grandma? You're still wearing that nonsense?" The woman didn't respond, just lowered her head as if to avoid confrontation. Barron's jaw tightened. He watched as the man stepped into her path, his mocking tone growing louder, his words sharper. Nobody moved. Nobody said anything. And that silence was what bothered Barron the most. The tension in the subway car grew thicker with every second, like a storm cloud rolling in and pressing down on everything and everyone. The frail elderly woman clutched her handbag tightly to her chest as if it were a lifeline. Her red "Make America Great Again" cap sat proudly atop her silver hair, an unmistakable symbol that had somehow turned her into a target. Across from her, the young man in the hoodie grinned, his shoulders slouched in an exaggerated stance of arrogance. His movements were restless, deliberate. He wasn't just trying to humiliate her, he was performing, like a comedian on a stage waiting for his audience to applaud. And while no one clapped, no one stopped him either. "What's the matter, Grandma? You forget what year it is?" He mocked, his voice loud enough to echo through the car. The woman didn't respond, just lowered her eyes to the floor. Barron Trump sat several rows away, his back pressed against the seat, fingers curling into fists inside the pocket of his hoodie. He watched it unfold in silence, waiting, hoping, for someone to intervene. There were at least 20 other passengers in that car, men in suits scrolling through their phones, mothers holding the hands of their small children, teenagers with earbuds in their ears pretending not to notice. Not one of them moved. It wasn't the first time Barron had seen something like this, the way people froze in the face of cruelty, choosing silence over confrontation. He had been taught better. From a young age, he knew that turning your head away from injustice made you complicit in it. His parents' voices echoed in his mind. If you have the power to do something, then you have the responsibility to do it. The young man took a step forward, blocking the woman's path as she shuffled toward a seat. "Where do you think you're going?" He sneered, tilting his head to look her up and down. "You're lost, aren't you? You and that ugly hat." The woman's eyes darted up, then back down. Her hands trembled slightly on her bag. "Leave me alone," she said softly, her voice small but steady. Her quiet resistance seemed to provoke him further. He reached out and grabbed the brim of her hat, yanking it off her head with a flourish like he was pulling off some twisted magic trick. "There we go," he shouted with mock triumph, holding the red cap up in the air for everyone to see. "Look at this." Grandma brought her MAGA cap out to play. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One or two people let out awkward laughs, unsure whether to condemn or ignore what was happening. A teenager in the corner pulled out his phone, the soft click of a camera app slicing through the thick silence. Barron's heart thumped louder. The world had turned into a spectator sport, people too afraid to act but quick to record, as if holding up a phone made them invisible. The woman reached up for her cap, her voice cracking with pain and indignation. "Give it back. Please," she said, her hands trembling in the air. "What's in it for me, Grandma?" The young man smirked, holding it just out of her reach. This thing belongs in the trash. Barron shifted in his seat, his tall frame straightening. A spark of heat shot through his chest, his instincts screaming at him to move. He looked around the car one last time, scanning the faces of the other passengers. Nothing. The man in the suit near the far door buried his face in his newspaper, pretending to be engrossed in the headlines. A woman across from Barron glanced at her child nervously before looking away again, pulling her toddler closer. The teenagers giggled in whispers, but their laughter felt forced, nervous. Nobody stood up. "Is this funny to you?" Barron's voice cut through the noise. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, deliberate. Every head in the subway car turned toward him, the young man included. His mocking grin faltered as his eyes landed on the figure now standing just a few feet away. Barron Trump had risen to his full height, his gray hoodie still pulled over his head, but his face was now visible. Recognition spread like wildfire through the crowd. Some whispered his name, others just stared in silence. The young man cocked his head, still holding the cap in his hand. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice edged with challenge. Barron's face was calm, but his eyes were steely. He took a step closer, closing the space between them. "I said, is this funny to you?" The subway car was so quiet now that even the rumbling of the train seemed muted. The young man glanced around as if looking for support, but found nothing. The nervous laughs had stopped. The teenager with the phone lowered it slightly, his recording forgotten. "It's just a joke, man," the young man muttered, though his voice had lost some of its confidence. "No," Barron replied, his tone even. "It's not a joke. Give her the hat back." The young man's bravado cracked just a little more, but he wasn't ready to back down. "Who do you think you are? Some kind of hero?" Barron didn't flinch. "I'm someone who knows the difference between right and wrong. And so do you." For a moment, the two stared at each other in a standoff. Barron's calm intensity held the young man frozen in place. The cap still dangled from his hand, but his grip on it was looser now. Around them, the passengers watched with bated breath, their earlier silence now tinged with shame. Finally, the young man's shoulders slumped, and he let out a frustrated scoff. "Whatever, man," he muttered. He tossed the cap onto the seat next to the elderly woman, his face twisted in irritation. "Take it back, Grandma." The woman reached for her hat slowly, clutching it close as if afraid someone might snatch it away again. She looked up at Barron, her eyes glistening with tears that hadn't yet fallen. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Barron didn't say anything at first. He just turned his gaze back to the young man, his expression steady and unyielding. "Apologize." The young man's head snapped up. "What?" "You heard me," Barron said firmly. "Apologize to her." The man glanced around again, looking for a way out. But the crowd had shifted. The silence of the subway car was no longer complicit, it was condemning. The passengers who had been so quick to look away before now stared at him with cold judgment. "Fine," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. He glanced at the woman, his face red with frustration. "I'm sorry, all right? I didn't mean anything by it. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough." Barron gave him one last look before turning back to the woman. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly, placing the cap back on her head. For the first time, she smiled faintly, a small, fragile smile that carried a world of gratitude. The train jolted as it approached the next station, the rumbling growing louder. Barron turned and walked back to his seat, pulling his hoodie up again as he sat down. The silence remained, but it was a different silence now, one that lingered with the weight of unspoken lessons. As the doors slid open, the young man hurried off the train, his face turned down to avoid meeting anyone's gaze. A few other passengers followed, stealing glances at Barron as they passed. The elderly woman remained seated, her bag clutched tightly to her chest and her hat back where it belonged. She looked up at Barron one last time, her eyes full of quiet appreciation. Barron leaned back against his seat, his face unreadable, but his heart finally steady. The air in the subway car grew thick with tension. Passengers who had been ignoring the situation suddenly looked up, their eyes darting between Barron and the man with the cap. A few whispers rippled through the car as people began to recognize him. The man shifted uneasily. "Look, man, it's just a joke." "No," Barron interrupted, his voice calm but firm. "It's not." He stepped closer, towering over the man now. "Give her back the cap. Now." The man hesitated, his bravado crumbling under the weight of Barron's stare. For a moment, it looked like he might argue back. But the murmurs in the car grew louder, and the eyes of the other passengers, the same people who had been silent minutes ago, were now focused squarely on him. Reluctantly, the man lowered his hand and shoved the cap toward the elderly woman. "Fine. Here," he muttered. The woman took it quickly, clutching it to her chest. She whispered a soft, shaky, "Thank you," though her eyes remained fixed on the floor. Barron wasn't done. "Apologize," he said. The man's head snapped up. "What?" "You heard me," Barron replied, his voice ice cold. "Apologize to her." The man swallowed hard. He looked around, hoping for someone to back him up, but no one did. Finally, he muttered through gritted teeth, "Sorry." It wasn't much, but it was enough. Barron stepped back, his gaze never leaving the man. Slowly, the tension in the car began to fade. The young man slumped back to his seat, glaring at the floor. The subway car returned to its rhythmic clatter as the train approached the next station. Barron sat back down, pulling his cap lower over his face again. The elderly woman, still clutching her cap and bag, glanced at him with quiet gratitude. "Thank you," she said softly. Barron gave her a small nod. "No one should treat you like that." The doors hissed open at the next stop. A handful of passengers exited, and a few shot Barron quick, knowing glances as they left. Whispers buzzed quietly through the remaining crowd. Phones that had been used to record earlier were now still, as if their owners felt ashamed for not stepping in sooner. As the train rolled on, Barron's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it at first, but the buzzing continued. Finally, he glanced at the screen, a notification from a news app. Video of Barron Trump standing up for elderly woman goes viral. His chest tightened slightly. He hadn't done it for attention or recognition, he'd done it because it was the right thing to do. The elderly woman caught his eye again and gave him a faint smile, one full of strength and resilience. "The world needs more young men like you," she said. Barron looked away, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Maybe the world just needs more people willing to do the right thing. The subway car continued its journey into the dark tunnels, and Barron leaned back, letting the hum of the tracks fill the silence. Outside, the world was watching, but for once, it felt like they were watching for the right reasons.